Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Fletcher Memorial. I'm glad to see so many familiar faces here. Thanks for being here tonight. So tonight is the last of the social activism through art, and I'm calling this one the holiday edition. And the holiday edition invited Catzie Vilayphonh, who you a lot of you might know, but she's an amazing person. She's an artist. She's a poet. She's a mother. She's a wife. She is also she leads Laos in the House. She's an activist. My God, she's a Wonder Woman. Cat, you do it all. And on top of that, she loves plants.
Mm.
Anyway, so I'm a big fan of this person, and I really do think this is gonna be amazing for everyone to see. So, Katsi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. What you been up to?
Well, if we're just talking about today, you were with me. We were trying to, for those of you out there, we were trying to figure out some technical issues, and it took a while. And luckily, we are problem solvers, and we found alternative ways for our presentation tonight to happen. So hopefully, you guys can also roll with the punches. And I can teach you what I know.
Before we go into that, what have you been writing? Have you been doing COVID? What you been up to?
um, well, I've been tending to my plants.
Good.
When the second lockdown started, I cut my bangs. Um, um, I haven't really been doing a lot of writing. I feel like I don't know. I feel like the whole shutdown sort of gave me an excuse to reset myself. And so I know a lot of times as a community leader, the minute something happens, they look to you and they say, "What should we do?" Or like, "We're looking to you to figure out something next." And I think for me, it was just time to just be like, I don't have the answers. I'm just gonna, sit back and wait and see what happens. And I think that a lot of times when you are in these positions of leading community, sometimes you're always constantly working and thinking about the next grant or the next project or the next big thing that you never really have time for yourself. And so I think that 2020 was sort of like, you need to sit down and just enjoy things and like let everyone else kind of do things and just not be so worried about whether or not you're represented or that you are doing the best for your community to see that you're doing something. Yeah, so that's sort of just, I think I've been trying to, like, as I call it, like normalize my life, just like kind of do like normal things. One thing that I always think about is like my daughter, her birthday is April 14th, which is Lao New Year. And I always feel bad because I always feel like I have to choose between like giving her a birthday party or like doing some like Laos on the House Lao New Year like thing where I have to show up or whatever. And so, this year we actually, she had a birthday party. It was on Zoom, but I think like for once it was nice to like not have to think about what am I doing for Lao New Year and then just like think about a duty. So yeah, so that's sort of like what my life has done.
Well, that's why we're here because we need to care about our plants. And I had so many questions for you, but of course I'm not gonna take this over. I'm gonna give this to you so you can actually
Okay.
give your presentation. So, Katsi, this is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I have my drink here. I don't know if you guys are drinking, but I have my drink. I'm drinking a coquito. Do you know what a coquito is?
No.
It's Puerto Rican eggnog.
Oh, of course I
Which
know what that
Oh,
is.
okay.
Hello.
Maybe it's not Puerto Rican. Maybe it's just like Spanish eggnog. I don't know. But it's yeah. So I made some for Thanksgiving, and for some reason, I'm the only person who drinks it. So I had to freeze some and put some, now I'm going through it. Like I said, like I was talking to you earlier, like going through my freezer and trying to use up everything that we have so that we're not like filling up our freezer. Anyway, so for those of you who are joining us, I am, as Gerard introduced me, Catzie Vilayphonh. I'm an artist. I run Louse in the House, and tonight I am going to be presenting to you all the things that I know about growing houseplants. And so in our original agenda, we were going to do a presentation, and then afterwards there was going to be a video house tour, and then there's going to be a show and tell. But since we had a little bit of technical problems trying to figure out everything, we're now just going to have a presentation that I'm going to talk through, and Gerard is going to be the person to present it. And then afterwards, we're going to, I guess, combine the video tour and show and tell onto one live video where I'm just going to take the camera off and walk around my house and show you everything I have. So yeah, so if we are all ready to get started, let's get started, Gerard.
Right.
Ooh, oh my God, I think you went too far.
There we
There
go.
we go. There we go. Okay. So, okay, welcome to Plauntie. For those of you who are wondering how it's pronounced, I pronounce it as Plauntie. I think of plant auntie, and then like trying to think of like your favorite auntie and like saying it the way she would say it. So then like when I say it, I just go Plauntie. I make my voice deeper, and then I make my jaw go down and go Plauntie. All right, so we're gonna go to the next slide, Gerard. All right, so me as a Plauntie, something that you had asked me earlier, Gerard, about why the word Plauntie, and I wanted to highlight the fact that like there's plant moms and then there's plant auntie, right? So like plant mom is basically I'm the mother of my plants. Whereas like an auntie or an auntie is not your mom, but they still give you advice. And I feel like Plauntie or plant auntie was like a really good compromise, because I'm giving you advice on plants that aren't mine. And I'm sort of in the ways that aunties give you unsolicited advice, just giving you the advice without asking you if this is what you want to know. I'm just going to give you what I know. The other reason that I wanted to call myself a Plauntie and not like say a plant expert or whatever, I feel like the word expert is relative, you know, so like if I was talking to you, Gerard, like maybe I'm an expert to you, but like for someone else who has more plants or who has owned plants longer, I may not be an expert. So I feel like I didn't want to call myself a plant expert. The other thing is that I am not a botanist. I did not go to school to study horticulture. There is no degree behind all of the things that I'm learning. So, you know, like me just putting that disclaimer out there just makes me feel better that I'm not like presenting myself as this person who's like a know-it-all and like here's this reason as to why I'm sharing this information with you. I'm just sharing this information because I feel like, you know, just like, you know, when I was sharing all of the things that I was doing on Instagram with my gardening, and Gerard, you had asked me like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't know you could do that. And so I feel like there's a lot of things that people will hit me up on and say, oh, is that something that you're supposed to do? Or I didn't know that this was like a trick, or like, oh, I didn't know this was possible. So this is just me just sharing the knowledge. Anyway, so yeah, so as a jungle Asian, you can go to the next slide, Gerard. My parents are from Laos. This is what Laos looks like. Go to the next slide, which is going to be Philadelphia. This is where I live now. So as you can see, those are two vastly different places to live. And I feel like part of me creating a jungle in my house is compromising with the fact that I no longer live in Laos and that I, you know, currently live in Philadelphia. And so that's just, you know, That's basically it. All right, go to the next part, Gerard. So I know that in the description that Fleischer shared, there's a part where I say something about sharing my strong feelings about flowers. So I don't really have like strong feelings about flowers, like I hate them or I like them. It's just that I prefer foliage. And part of it is because like foliage is always going to be there, whereas flowers only come into bloom for a short time. So I just feel like I like things that I know that are going to be more permanent versus something that just shows up for a little bit. Anyway, so I do love tropicals because I am a jungle Asian, but I do have a soft spot for the ones, you know, when I read about them and they say that they're native to Southeast Asia, I always feel like a little tug in my hair, like, oh, me too, you're just like me. So like I said, I'm not a botanist, but my friends are, and I bother them all the time. So some of the information that I'm giving you is information that they've given me. My houseplants also help me rearrange my house. When COVID and lockdown all started, a lot of the things I was doing in the beginning was like, rearranging what my house looked like because I was in it all the time and I was trying to figure out like where things looked best. And so I feel like having plants sort of helps me out in that. I have another Instagram account called Mid-Century Jungle Asians. It's not very, I just started it and it's really mostly about like me moving my plants around and my furniture around and remembering what it looked like, but it's not really anything, but shameless plug. Anyway, next, Gerard. Okay, so because I'm talking to myself and I can't really hear you guys and I don't know like what kind of things, you know, if I should be moving faster or slower or whatever, please let Gerard know if there's a question that you have and then Gerard's going to stop me and we can answer any questions along the way. But hopefully the things that I've covered are things that I had questions about for myself and my own plants. And so some of those topics I love and some of those topics annoy me. So I'll try not to let that show in my voice. So, okay. Now that you know who I am as a plant auntie, we should ask you guys the same question, which is what kind of Plauntie are you? So next slide, Gerard. Okay, so I put up these three, I don't know, I guess you can call them memes. One of them's not really a meme, one's a screenshot. So if you just go to the next part, Gerard. The first is my friend Mukta, who's an amazing artist and mother. And she wrote that she can keep her son alive, but not her plants. And so I feel like there's like a kind of plant parent who they're trying their best, but they're not really sure what they're doing. And I feel like, you know, that's fine. I noticed how the question was, what kind of Plauntie are you? Not so much what kind of Plauntie are you trying to be? So then the next kind of Plauntie, go ahead, Gerard, is like this person who's like, oh, I have plants, they're my children, and I have to like make sure they're alive and feed them and nurture them. And so that kind of plant parent is also totally fine. And in this presentation, I hope that you figure out the kind of plant parent that you are, or plant Plauntie. And that, like, you know, some days you feel like Mukta and sometimes you feel like is that Billy Zane? And then the next slide is going to be the kind of plant parent that nobody wants to be, which is like the kind where everybody knows that you kill your plants. Like, you know, plants sometimes die. You can't really escape it. And sometimes people beat themselves up over it and some people like sort of hide the fact. I mean, I've killed plants before too, so it's not a surprise, but I think we all agree that if we're going to join this plant world, that we don't want to be this kind of plant parent. All right, so let's get into the topics. So the first topic is going to be water. Go ahead, Gerard. Water, because of black thumb, is usually a wet thumb. So they say that the number one killer of houseplants is overwatering, and that just comes from people either like again, they are so doting on their plants and they're like, I don't know what's wrong with you. And like the next thing that they can think of is watering, or infrequent watering, meaning that, you know, like you remember to water when you remember. And so that might not be a regular schedule. And so for the plant suffers because it's also like they're not sure when they're going to get their next drink of water, but also like the amount that you feed them. So sometimes, you know, if you give them a little bit of water in the beginning and then you give them a little bit of water in the next one, the way that their roots grow, it messes around with it. So the two things I'm going to focus on are root moisture and air humidity. So Jordan, if you go over to the right. So air humidity is just basically the moisture in the air. And then root moisture is just the moisture that's in the soil. So basically that line represents the two kinds of moisture that a plant basically gets. And if you're like the kind of plant parent that's like, I just need the minimal basic knowledge, then we're going to focus on root moisture, because that's sort of like, that's basically the water that you pour into the pot. So we're going to go into that slide, Gerard. So pots and watering. You can't talk about watering without talking about pots, because simply put, the pots are what's holding the plants. The pots are holding the roots. And when you give water to the roots, they go into the pot. So if you go into the next slide, Gerard, the pots that you see now, the black nursery pots are what you get when you buy your plants in the plant store. And then on the bottom are terracotta pots, which are normally the pots that you get when your plants are cacti and succulents. And so material is like a really important factor. So just like when you buy bottled water, it comes in plastic because the water is not going to leak out. And so that's why plastic is used, because it's also, you know, it just holds the water. And like in a greenhouse, when they water their plants, they have, you know, concrete floors that let you, you know, let the water drain through the hole. And there's no problem with holding the water in and letting it evaporate that way. Terracotta pots, as you know, absorb water. And you can tell usually when this is happening, because when you water a cactus that has terracotta pots, you'll see like the color of the cactus, the color of the terracotta pot changing. So you know that it's absorbing water. And so the reason why terracotta is used is because of this action that it does, which is absorbing the water. So instead of holding the water in like plastic would, it helps to evaporate the water faster, which is something that cactus and succulents like to do, is to not have wet soil. So if you go to the right, Gerard, those are saucers. Basically, if you're going to have a pot that has a hole in it, you're going to have a saucer. And the two that I'm showing is the terracotta, which matches the one on the left, and then the clear plastic one, which is commonly sold because the fact that it's clear, it can go with any pot. The other thing that you have to remember too is that saucers aren't really supposed to be part of the presentation of the plant or the pot itself. It's kind of there just to collect the water. So if you are watering your plant and the water's going through the hole, you can just put it in the saucer, and then when it's done dripping, put it back to where it was. You don't have to have a saucer just for looks. Like it's just more to collect the water. If you choose to put your plant in a pot with a drainage hole and then put it in a saucer, just remember that after maybe like half an hour to go check on it. And if there's still water sitting in the saucer, to go dump that water out in the sink. You don't want your plants to be sitting in plant water. That's basically how they get root rot. Root rot is something that happens when your plant roots get too much water and the water has nowhere to go. So it's basically almost like drowning in it. Does anybody have any questions? I feel weird talking to myself because I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if people are leaving or.
We're here. We're all here.
Okay. All right. Okay. So the next slide, Gerard, this is an orchid pot. I think this is where I got it from. So as you notice, there's like lots and lots of holes in the pot itself. And I'm seeing all the comments. Thank you guys. Thank you for letting me know that I'm like reaching you guys. So I'm going to answer the question after I get to this part. So this is an orchid pot. And as you notice that there's two pots and then there's a saucer. So the first pot has a bunch of holes in it, whereas the bottom pot or the second pot is completely covered, but the holes are in the bottom. Part of the reason why is because orchids grow in naturally, they grow on bark, or they don't really grow in the soil. You know what I mean? So when you are trying to recreate the environment of what an orchid grows in, you're going to give it something super loose. And should you accidentally not do that, the pot having all these extra holes helps bring air to it so that it's not just soaking in water. And of course, this is like a whole set where like things match, and it's up to your aesthetics if you want pots and saucers that match or don't match. Totally up to you. So somebody in the chat asked me, how do I feel about bottom watering? I don't mind bottom watering. So for those of you who don't understand what bottom watering is, so bottom watering is instead of you taking the watering can and putting it into the top part of the soil, you take the whole pot itself and then put it in kind of like a deeper container full of water, and then let the plant drink up water through the hole on the bottom. And so I read at some places on the internet that this is a little bit more natural, that this is a better system because the roots are at the bottom, and so then they end up taking the drink that they need. The other thing that bottom watering does is if you have fungus gnats, which are these little bugs that like to lay their eggs on the top part of your soil, bottom watering is great because then you never keep that top surface of the soil wet. So then like the fungus gnats won't have a place to lay their eggs, and then because the top part of the soil is wet. The only thing that I don't like about bottom watering is that it takes a really, really long time. Because if you think about it, it's like the root is trying to drink water, but in the opposite way of gravity. Whereas like if you are pouring water into a pot and the water's going down and you wait and see the water coming out the hole, then like it's had enough to drink and then you can just stop. So I feel like that's the only thing about bottom watering. I feel like I only do it if I'm dealing with fungus gnats. Okay, let's go to the next slide, which is what are we talking about? Oh, humidity. Okay, humidity. Next slide. Okay, so here's something to remember for plants. All plants like humidity except for cacti and succulents. So if you're like confused as to what's going on with your plant and like, is it a humidity issue? And if you're dealing with a cacti or a succulent, it's not a humidity issue because they don't like humidity. It's not that they don't like humidity, they just don't like it as much as other plants. And so, cacti and succulents naturally live in the desert where it's dry and arid. So humidity is not really like a thing that they're thirsting for. And so 3 ways that you can up the humidity in your house, which I think we all can benefit from because it's wintertime and we have the heat going. First is that you can use a spray bottle and just spray the air around them. The other way is that you can use or make a humidity tray with rocks and water. And then the last is to buy a humidifier that you can just plug in and it's on its own. So Gerard, if you can just go to the next. So this is like, this is a regular spray bottle. I think any one works fine. The one that's shown here is like, it has that like, I guess it's called like a trigger nozzle. It's basically if you press it, then the water comes out. And I used to have one of those, but then like I have so many plants that by the time I got to the 3rd floor, my hands started hurting. So then I switched to this other one that I bought from Amazon, which is it's like a continuous mist. And basically if you like spray it 3 times, like the mist just comes out. in one long, fine spray, as opposed to like one that's like just spurting out. The other thing I don't like about these two is that when you get to the bottom of the water, like the water just kind of spits out. It doesn't like come out in like a fine mist that you want it to be. So, but I mean, I think any spray bottle works fine. I know we're in a pandemic and like sometimes supplies are out of, you know, out of stock and you can't order anymore. You can totally use like an old cleaning supply spray bottle and then just fill it up with water. Just make sure you clean it so there's no chemicals inside, and then just use that. All right, if we go to the next slide. So this is a water tray, a humidity tray. And basically you are just pouring water into a tray, and the water evaporating from the tray creates sort of like a humidity dome for the plant. And the reason that we add rocks is because we want to make sure that the water doesn't get sucked back into the pot by the roots. And so the rocks separate the water from touching the roots. So basically the rocks are sort of like the barrier to make sure that the water just stays where it's supposed to stay, which is outside of the pot, and then just evaporates around the plant. Next slide, Gerard. These are humidifiers. I don't know the brand of these. I just like that they were called H2O, but I think all humidifiers kind of work the same way. They can be battery operated or you plug them in. Some of them have timers where you can leave it on for an hour, leave it on for 8 hours. Some of them have disco lights, but basically it's the same idea where you are making the air around your plants more humid. And of course, like a humidifier will obviously do a better job than you standing there and spraying and getting arthritis in your hand. But it does, you know, it does take some time to fill up the thing and to turn it on and remember to turn it off, or, you know, to keep it going. So that's humidity. What's next? What do I have? I'm trying to memorize what I did, but I can't. Oh, lights. There we go. Are there any Sean Paul fans out there? I should have had Sean Paul playing for this part. Okay, so the next important thing is going to be sunlight, because basically plants, the way that plants live is through making chlorophyll, and they can't make chlorophyll if they don't have light. And so normally it would be sunlight, but since we are trying to grow plants in our house, we can supply grow lights. So we're going to start with sunlight. So go ahead, Gerard.
Of course, my mouse just like froze.
It's okay. All right. So here's like a diagram of light and the rays of light going into your house. I know some people get really confused as to where do I put my plant? And like, just like me, I would put all my plants in the windowsill and nowhere else, because I was like, well, that's where the sun is. So something that you have to remember is, you know, in your house, the direction of the sun. So if you go to the next slide, it's going to zoom into the, yeah. So south and west facing windows have the strongest light, whereas a north facing window does not. I mean, I'm speaking in terms of us who are here in North America, that the light here matters. And so if you have a house and your apartment or whatever, and you have a north facing window, it doesn't matter what you put in your windowsill, it's not going to get sunburn. The same way if you had a south facing window and you put a plant there and all of a sudden you're like, why is this plant all dried up? So that's something that you have to consider. And so next time, if you are thinking about where to put your lights, I would suggest that you don't turn on any of your lights in the house and look at where the light is hitting. So if you can see in the diagram, anywhere that's directly in front of the window is considered bright direct light. And then anywhere that's sort of next to that part is called bright indirect light. So it's not in the light of the window, it's sort of next to it. So it's still bright enough. And then medium would be a little bit further away. And then low light is obviously a little bit more further away. And something that people have to understand when we say low light, we don't mean like complete darkness. We mean that it's dark, but you could probably still read something. You know what I mean? I think that people get confused about dark and low light. And they're not the same thing. Darkness, I mean, nothing really can grow in darkness. I mean, I guess some things can, but if we're talking about houseplants, it's not going to be in darkness. You need a little bit of light for low light to happen. Okay. And if you ever have a question about bright indirect light, if you stand in front of your window and you can see the sun, that's bright light. So that's one way that you can test the light in your house. All right. So I don't know if I zoom into my words in here. Gerard, can you click next? Oh, it doesn't. Oh, go back. Okay. So I'm just gonna say really fast all the things that I just said. So again, southwest facing lights. Again, the more light you have, the faster the evaporation. If you have cacti and succulents, put them in a really bright window and all the water will evaporate just like they like it. You can control the amount of light that your plants get based on how far or close they are from the window. Leaves or solar panels, so don't forget to rotate. Sometimes I see plants where people they're like off facing one way, or like you'll see a tree is like leaning one way because it's trying to reach for the light, because people either forget to rotate their plants. So think about it. If your plant or a tree or whatever is growing naturally outside, the sun itself rises from the east and then sets in the west. So it gets it gets sun from all over. So you don't have to worry about which part of the plant it's not getting. But since it's in your house and it's only getting sunlight from one side, you have to remember then the side that's not getting any sunlight, you have to turn it around so that that side gets light. Plants with very thin leaves burn easily, whereas thick, fleshy plants can withstand the heat. So again, cacti and succulents, thick, fleshy plants, they're okay with all that sun. If you have a plant where the leaves are very, very delicate and thin, I would err on the side of putting them in medium light. And then if you feel like they look unhappy, like move them a little bit closer. I wouldn't start bright. If you are unsure about what to do with lights, I would start a little bit dark and then like start moving it closer to the brighter light. Since we are in the wintertime, the days are shorter. And so the amount that you water them should also be less, right? So the relationship between light and water, it's sort of like if the plant is dry, you water it. If the plant is too watery, you dry it. And so because they're getting less light now, you should also lessen the amount that you water it. Last but not least, if you can bring plants outside for the spring and summer, do it. And I say if you can, only because I don't know, where everybody lives. And so you might not live in a house that has like an area outside where you can like put your plants. Maybe you live in a neighborhood where like you can't leave anything outside, but also you might have like a huge plant that is just impossible to keep bringing in and out the house. So that's why I said if you can. But if you think about plants and where they come from, being outside would be like a really nice treat for them. And so if you can do it, do it. If you can't, no problem. So we're going to go to the next slide for that one, which is grow lights. So again, the importance of placement, how far or close your plant is to your light. If we go to the next slide, Gerard, this is an illustration from Soltech. They make grow lights. And this is, if you look on it, you'll see on the left is like their medium light, and on the right is their I guess big bright light. And so that's just recommendations of how far and close you should put your plants to the light. Notice that the low light plants, they tell you to put it 36, 48, 60 inches away from the light, because you're trying to mimic a low light situation. So if you have a plant and you have one of these lights, keep it further away. But obviously, if you have a bright light or a full light plant or a full sun plant, you would place it closer. If you go to the next slide drawer. So here's like a person who has grow lights. So you notice on top of their windowsill, the other plants, they're doing fine because they're sitting in the windowsill, they're getting sunlight. But because this person has now put a table, that area on the bottom is not going to get any light. And so they've now put like a long bulb for their succulents. And you notice that, look how close the succulents are to the light. And so that's just another indication of like a way to set up your lights. So if we go to the next slide, Gerard, this person has a clamp light. And I know that they sell them like this because sometimes you want to put your plant in a place, but it doesn't really fit a whole lamp or anything else. So like these little clamp guys come in handy. You can just put them anywhere. So again, these are succulents. Notice how close they are to the light. If we go to the next slide, Gerard. So this one's really cool. This one is, I think this person had these cool lamps and then they just decided to put a bunch of grow light bulbs in them. I don't think this is a grow light bulb plant fixture. I think this person just had these really cool lights that kind of look like tulips. And then they just put grow light bulbs in them. And you can usually tell that they're grow light bulbs because grow light bulbs come in, they don't come in really pretty styles, unfortunately. But most of the time they come in like what they look like white coils. And then the other times they kind of look like they look like regular light bulbs, but then they'll have like a ring around it. But they don't look like normal light bulbs. Yeah, so I like grow light bulbs because they're cheaper than installing windows or buying a house with bigger windows. Your plants need more lights. The only way you can really give them more light is to give them closer access to the sun, or you can just put in a grow light. All right. Does anybody have any questions about the grow lights? Okay. All right, so the next one I think is going to be growing media. This was the topic that got on my nerves. Oh, okay. So I have a question about how do I feel about red blue lights versus white lights? So I know that the red blue lights, that they're supposed to affect the growth of your plant in some way. I don't remember what the effect was, but aesthetically, I like white lights. I like lights that kind of just look like regular light fixtures. And so I try my best to get white lights so that it looks like part of my house, so that when I turn on the light, it looks like, like a regular house light. I know like some people when they do like their red blue fixtures, and then when they turn off their light, it kind of looks kind of like a science experiment because everything's like purple and red and blue, and then like the way that they set up their plants, they're all in like these trays and stuff. I think that whatever floats your boat, if you love purple, I think you should get the red and blue lights because that gives a purple light. I think for me, I just like the white lights. Okay, so somebody asked what kind of lights do I recommend? What kind of brand? I don't know if I have like a recommendation. I have some that I bought off the internet, bought off Amazon. I actually have a long bar. Is that what they're called? It's like it's basically the light bulb that's just like a long tube, a long bulb. And that one is from, it's called SunGrow, I think the name of the company is. And I feel like because like they specifically make bulbs for grow lights, like I would trust them more. So more than buying like a quote unquote grow light bulb from like Philips or some other light bulb company, I would go with one that's all they make. All they make is light bulbs for plants and nothing else. I do have a Soltech light bulb, which are the really expensive ones that look like light fixtures, like you hang up in your house and it kind of just looks like a light fixture. Somebody asked, how long do I keep the grow lights on for? That's a really good question. So right now, some of the plants that I have in my house, I make them mimic the light that's going on outside our house right now. So if the sun comes up at 7 and then goes down around 4:30, 5 o'clock, that's what I set it to, just so that they get sort of like the same kind of sunlight. There are some plants in my house that are tropical and they kind of need more light. And I set it to go on for about 15 hours. And so I try to make it so that they come on during the morning and that they turn off at least by midnight, right? So, because you don't want lights going on in your house the whole entire time. But I do have timers for those, and like timers are so amazing, and they help so much. All right, so growing media, again, topic that gets on my nerves. Only because like I feel like people get really passionate about the kind of things that plants can grow in and like trying to change it up. And to me, I just feel like, you know, if you give your plant a growing medium that can retain water and gives it air, you should be fine. But I'm just going to cover this topic because I feel like it's something that might happen. So anyway, plants can grow in many kind of materials. Soil is just a loose term for a mixture of things that they can grow in. Soil is not the same as dirt. I would refrain from calling soil and dirt the same things, only because when I think of dirt, I think of things that are unclean, and that's not true. Soil is, you know, it's not unclean. It's just, I don't know, if you don't like having dirt on your hands, like you're not gonna like soil. But anyway, I would refrain from calling soil and dirt the same thing. But again, like I said, soil or whatever it is that you're growing your plant in should have two main functions. One is to retain water and the other is to provide oxygen. Okay, Gerard, next slide, please. All right, so we're gonna cover two things. One is make your own soil or your own media or substrate or whatever you wanna call it. And then the second one, Gerard, are the different kinds. Okay, so the first one is going to be the different kinds of things that make up soil, media, substrate, whatever you want to call it. If you mix any of these materials that I'm showing you together, that is making a soil. If you use one material, that's calling it a soilless medium or a soilless substrate. So Gerard, if you go to the next slide. So here I have peat moss and sphagnum moss. If you've ever bought potting soil from the store, from the gardening store or Home Depot or wherever, most likely the brown stuff that's in your bag is peat moss. So both peat moss and sphagnum moss, as you can see from their glistening pictures, they hold water really well. But peat moss is smaller, so that's why it makes sort of like a better, I guess, medium to mix in. If you ever hold peat moss or sphagnum moss in your hand, if you ever get them wet and hold them in your hand and you squeeze them, you can see how much water they hold, because then like all this water will come out. But at the same time, as you're squeezing them, they'll probably take the shape of your hand. And what that's doing is you're also squeezing out the air. And so while these both are really good at holding water, they're not very good at leaving space for air. And so what happens sometimes is that people, they get really excited about potting their new plant, and then they'll like stuff the peat moss into the pot. And so as they're stuffing it into the pot, they don't realize they're also pushing out the air. So that brings us to the next slide, Gerard, which are other things that will get mixed into. So perlite is white puffy rock. And so if you buy potting soil, most of the time you're going to be getting peat moss and perlite. And so as a rock, you can't really squeeze a rock. So therefore, like it'll never, like you can't squeeze the air out of it. You know what I mean? So basically it's kind of like a space holder that lets air go through. And so a lot of times people call this drainage. If you add, you know, like clay pebbles or other kinds of rocks, that lets the water go through. But because it also isn't going to be squeezable, it also lets the air go through. Coconut fiber is an alternative to peat moss. Some people don't like peat moss because it's unsustainable. So apparently To harvest peat moss, you have to go to these peat bogs, and because people have been doing it for so long, they worry that at some point there won't be any more peat moss to harvest, and so an alternative to peat moss is coconut fiber. Rock wool, I don't know what rock wool is. I know it looks like asbestos, but I don't know what it's made out of. I know it's not asbestos. It's just, that's what it reminds me of, but it's sort of like this woolly texture that, again, absorbs water, but because it has all this space, like also provides air. All right, next slide. Some more things, more rock wool, Oasis Cube. Oasis is a company that makes these like foam things, and sometimes when you get like a floral arrangement, sometimes it comes in a little foam thing. So again, it's like a sponge that has air and holds water. So again, it's doing the two things that you need the most. More clay pebbles, cocoa chips, orchid bark is also something that is used, tree bark. It's just basically like a chunky thing that if you try to squeeze it, you can't. So that's why it keeps its shape and then therefore can let air go through. More perlite, vermiculite rock. Again, things that you can't really squeeze and let the air out of it. So they would make really good things to grow in. All right, next slide. Oh yeah, water. I forgot about that. So water, you can actually grow things in just water. Why? Because water holds water, but water is H2O and has oxygen. I don't think all plants can grow in water. I know that there are some that do really well and some that like just can't. So I think it's one of those things where you have to experiment. But again, like water is something that you can use if you need to keep a plant going. Does anybody have any questions about this part? No, okay. Well, maybe you do, but I'm gonna get into this part, which
Catzie, we have about 15 more minutes.
we do?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I didn't even get through like the entire thing. I talk way too much.
No.
I'm so sorry. Listen, I'm gonna make this, I'm not even gonna read anything. Okay. If you're looking at the salad jar and thinking like, why the hell did she put a picture? I couldn't find an illustration of making your own soil, but basically if you go to the next slide, Gerard, no, go to the next one. Okay. So this is like, you know, if you buy any of those materials and you're trying to make your own soil, like, this is the best illustration I can come up with. So if you look at salad dressing and pretend that that's water, see how it's all at the bottom? But you notice that the things that are at the bottom are the things that are the chunkiest and can take all of that water absorption. And then moving on up is going to be all, you know, it's in the order of things that like would get way too wet. So basically all the leaves are at the top because they would get really wet and they wouldn't be able to like hold themselves together. So that's basically why I did that. If you go back one, Gerard, I do want to make this really important notification. So like people get confused about soil and they're like, why do we have, you know, how is this soil different from that soil? So the three main that I feel like, well, first is garden soil. Garden soil is meant to be outside. It goes into your garden beds. It has compost. It has all the things that like would be okay with evaporating into the air and like withstanding like the heat of the sun and like having, you know, bugs and birds and worms go through it. Topsoil goes into the ground. It's very, very heavy and should not be used for potting soil. It's mostly used for lawns if you're trying to grow grass, but also if you have a hole and you're trying to fill the hole, or if you're like trying to plant a tree or something. Potting soil is what you should be used because it's formulated to go into a pot so that it could take the water and then like, you know, evaporate on time. And so some people get really confused because they're like, why is succulent cacti mix different? You know, it's just formulated because if you know you're going to be using it for cacti, it probably has more sand and perlite. But you know what? In all honesty, if you just use regular potting soil, you should be fine. Okay, we're going to go out. Gerard. Since we have 15 minutes, I don't know what people want to do. I don't think I can go around my house in 15 minutes. I obviously talk too much. So, what should we do?
Do you want to show some of your plants?
Yeah, sure. You know what? Well, here, we'll start. I'll show you my living room. I'll show you my living room because that one, it has the biggest window and therefore has like the most plants. I'm really sorry, you guys. I thought that I was in my mind. I was like, yeah, this is way enough. Wait, hold on. I have to like undo the screw that holds my phone onto this clip.
Oh, we're well moved. Everyone wants to see your house.
Everybody saw that. Okay. How do I turn it around? Oh, there I go. God, I'm such a new. That's my child. She was standing there trying to tell me, I know I can help you. I can help you do this. So as a millennial, she's trying to show me that I'm like not that smart or whatever with technology. Okay. So we are in my house, and as you can see, can you go open that curtain? So this is a south facing window. And so when the sun comes up, it comes up from the left and goes to the right. And so the way that I've set up my plants is that I have all of the cacti in this section and then all the humidity loving plants in this section. And that little cloud thing is my humidifier. So obviously it's on the right side because that's where all the plants that love humidity would be. And part of the reason why I have left and right is because like when the sun sets in the west, the strength of the sun rays is stronger, so it's going to hit all the cacti. And when the sun raises in the morning, it's very, very gentle, and so it's going to get all these guys on the right. So over there is my my long bulb, light bulb, whatever you want to call it, my grow light. So I set that on a timer so that when the sun is up, it's on, and when the sun goes down, so it's like basically they're all matching. To the right is the Soltic light that I was talking about, that like the one that looks like a light fixture. And this one I only have on for 5 hours, only because these two plants here, like this rubber plant gets sunlight from the window. And then like when we get packages or the day's nice and we leave the door open, the cat likes to look out the window. Like this little begonia is going to get sunlight from the door. So that's why this light isn't on all day, and it only is going to be for a couple hours. There I am again. This is my Norfolk pine, which is now my my Christmas tree. And it's technically a tropical tree, and it's not that close to the window, but it's only going to be here temporarily until I guess Christmas is over. But because it's a tropical tree, I am trying to still treat it like one. And so if you look under the little skirt, you'll see that I have a little tray, a humidifier tray, so it's like rocks and water so that this guy still stays wet. So that's my living room.
I can't see which direction does your house faces.
My house, so this one that we're looking at now, my house faces south. So my house is facing south. So again, the sun would rise from the east and then like the west that way. I can show you, I don't know if you guys want to see the area that was behind me.
Yes.
My daughter wants to show the cat. Okay, so we're gonna walk towards where the part that was just behind me. Okay, so again, this is a Soltec light. It's supposed to be like the brighter one. And so as you can see, I have a Monstera, and the Monstera is pretty close to the light because I had my Monstera outside in the summer, so the leaves got really, really big. So that's why, you know, it's here. There's a little begonia. Then there's my little camouflage plant. It's all the way at the bottom. And naturally, this plant, that's how it would grow. It would grow on like the under part of plants. So like if I move, see if I move my Monstera plants, like it'll affect the light. This is my Dracaena. I did this really cool thing with my Dracaena where I put it sideways for 2 weeks. And as you, I don't know if you could see the bend in the branches. And so now that I've had it this way, you can see that it's like trying to make its way up again and go towards the light. So that's something cool that you can do with Dracaena. Somebody asked, how do I keep the cat from
eating the plants?
Eating the plants. So the first thing that I did was I had a spray bottle, the same spray bottle that I used to mist my plants. Whenever my cat would try to get close to my plants, I would like spray him. So then he got used to the idea that if he saw this, like he had to run away. The other thing that I do is that um, I keep the plants that are the most dangerous for him, like up higher and away from him. And then the plants that are safer for him, like ones that if he chews it, he'll be fine. Like I keep them closer to him so that if he feels like he needs a plant to chew on, he's going to go for the one that's closer to him and not the one that's going to be dangerous for him. Um, I think that's mostly, I mean, he kind of like minds his business now. I mean, oh no, you know what? That's not true. Here's something I have to show you. And this is, you might find this hilarious. So it's not that he was eating the plant, but he was like pooping in the pot and it was like really annoying me. So, okay. Look at this, guys. Look at this. Do you see it?
Yes.
It's plastic forks. It's plastic forks to keep my cat from trying to poop in my freaking fiddle leaf. I originally put in some oyster shells, which are like, naturally if you throw them in, if you were growing bulbs outside, it would keep squirrels from trying to dig up, but I think like the cat's paws are much bigger so it doesn't affect him. So I put forks in there to keep him from trying to get to my plants. So he hasn't been in here, thank God. So plants. I don't know what other questions people have.
Yeah, let's take, if anyone has, before we go, any questions, please. This is the moment.
I'm really sorry that we had to cut short. I had a whole nother thing, but I hope that I got through the important parts.
Yeah, but we have one more hour really of information for you. So if
one more hour.
Yeah.
What do you mean 1 more hour? I thought you just told me I had 15 minutes.
We only went halfway on your slideshow. Okay, so.
Oh, what's my plant to give to someone who is an okay gardener? When you say gardener, you mean like gardening? Because when I say gardening, when I use the term gardening, I mean it as like somebody who plants outside. Oh, someone who's okay with plants. I would give them a snake plant because those are kind of hard to kill. They are succulents, so therefore they're okay with being dry. They can live in low light. And so if the person that you're giving it to, like they may not remember to water or they're like not really sure where they're going to put their plants, I think a snake plant is great because a snake plant, even though it can survive in low light, it is a succulent. So even if you put it in a really bright sunny spot, it'll be okay. Stop. The child is now abusing the cat, so. No. If you have any of the plants that grow babies really well, like I would give those away because then it's a way for you to control not having so many plants in your house, but also like, you have free plants. Why don't you give it to your friends? And so I think somebody mentioned Pilia, which is the plant that I have here. So this plant is like, I don't know. I think it's like 2 feet tall. And the light that was here, the way that I had it set up, I had it with these like, I forget what I used the first time to have it, but the heat melted whatever was like gluing it together, and then this thing fell down. And as it fell down, it took some of the pilia leaves down. And so that's sort of the reason why I keep the babies. So a lot of times with pilias, people will take the babies out and like give them to people so that you only have one plant. But because this plant lost so many leaves, I keep the babies in here to make it look full. So like if I didn't keep the babies, this one would look kind of bald. And so I don't know, that's just sort of what I do. Somebody said something about, was there wrong with keeping plants in nursery pots, just repotting them to bigger ones? No, you can totally keep your plants in the nursery pots that they came in. I would just make sure that you check them right? Because again, like they're plastic. And so if you have any cacti or succulents, the water that you give them would stay in there longer than if you had changed it into like a terracotta pot like this one. So there's totally nothing wrong with keeping your the nursery pots. You just have to check them. You just have to make sure that, you know, that they're not staying wet too long, that they're in a place where if you water them, that the sun is reaching it to let it evaporate.
And I think that's about all the time we have for today. I think that the next webinar should be Q&A because people have a lot of questions about
I
plants.
know. You know what? That's part of the reason that I was doing like just me talking and no asking questions was like, okay, I'm staying with the whole theme of like unsolicited advice. Like, okay, you don't ask me anything, I'm gonna tell you. But the other thing is like, again, like I'm not like a scientist, so like I didn't want it to turn into a session where people were like, what's wrong with my plant? And then like I would have to assess like the thing. I can't diagnose it, you know what I mean? So I just know what I know, and like if you ask me, I will try to give you my best answer, but it might not be scientifically proven. So I'm just, you know, I'm just sharing what I know.
Well, we really appreciate it, and thank you so much for being here with us tonight, Catzie. I think
Thank you, Gerard.
we're gonna have part 2. Anyway, thank you all for being here tonight, and happy holidays.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Please stay tuned for more. All right. Have a
Thank
good night.
you. Good night, guys. Bye-bye.